The first European regional was far from a disappointment as we saw some spicy innovations, the end of Tier 0 perceptions, the revival of some Origins legends, and Alan ZQ showing us some of the best Riftbound performances to date. I'm Rose with 4 Hearts, and today we're going to recap the Bologna Regional Qualifier. Coming out on top was an extremely meticulous Ezreal build that genuinely had an answer for everything that was thrown at it, including a Dazzling Aurora deck that no one expected to see anywhere near top cut, let alone the grand finals. We've seen control builds in the past from legends like Viktor and Lux, but everything so far has been based on killing units reactively as opposed to engaging with them directly. But playing off of the back of a Miracle Engine foundation, Alan ZQ has created an impressive list that utilizes the speed of the Chaos domain and pairs it with the heavy unit control found in the Mind domain. With a unit core that consists of Ezreal Prodigy, Fizz Trickster, and Vex Cheerless, this deck isn't the strongest when it comes to direct, unit-based combat, but it doesn't need to be. With Ezreal kicking off the Miracle Engine and cutting down on repeat costs, Fizz replaying cheap spells from the trash, and Vex also cutting down on spell costs, this deck can consistently see a minimum of 4 to 5 cards played every turn in the mid and late game. This mixture of relatively cheap utility units, incredibly cheap spells, and the Miracle Engine results in a deck that flies through cards to make sure it always has what it needs on any given turn. Vex Cheerless in particular was proven to be such a valuable piece in Alan's run, showcasing just how powerful it is when built around properly. This is a card that was believed to have some decent potential when it was first revealed, but up until now, not many have been able to figure out how to best utilize it. But after this run, I'm sure it'll become a staple in every Ezreal deck, and potentially find its way into other Chaos decks in the future should we see more control-based Chaos legends. While the core units and strategies are obviously an amazing foundation, what really takes this deck above everything else we've seen in the meta is how this foundation enables the rest of the list. All of the common staples are there at 3 copies, but because of the insane draw power and cheap costs, this deck is able to run 1 copy of a lot of important pieces, like Thousand-Tailed Watcher, Mind Splitter, Smokescreen, Singularity, and Frigid Touch. Even Ezreal Prodigy, which is usually held to 3 copies in other Miracle Engine decks, can be brought down to 1 since it's a chosen champion. And as important as Fizz is, Alan only needed 2 for this build thanks to Retreat, Morbid Return, and Arcane Shift enabling him to be replayed. This is also probably one of the best decks at going second, since it isn't concerned with playing 2 drops on its first turn in most situations, and would almost always rather play Ezreal Prodigy on its opening turn. This deck is incredibly fast, has a unique style in playing most of its spells during combat, is incredibly resourceful, and is by far the best control deck we've seen so far. Surprising everyone by finishing in second place is a somewhat traditional but incredibly refined Dazzling Aurora list, and even more surprising, not the Sivir iteration. With many people viewing Dazzling Aurora as a dead deck heading into this format thanks to all the new gear removal, there's a couple of new Spirit Forge cards that have made this variant worth consideration. Firstly, the addition of Cold Shot has made Dazzling Aurora a lot more consistent for Chaos decks. With 3 copies of Cold Shot in stack deck, Chaos offers a potential 15 extra cards for Dazzling decks to look at throughout the course of a game. While Cold Shot does recycle a hefty amount of runes, playing it off the back of Mobilize and Catalyst of Aeons can keep you on curve while also providing extra draw support when looking for Dazzling, all without taking up energy that can be spent on other cards. This build can certainly still brick, but it has reasonable ways of coming out of bad hands through this draw support and 1 copy of Invert Timelines. The other notable Chaos addition is Last Rites. Both effects of this gear are incredibly important for the success of this deck, because as a control variant of Dazzling Aurora, consistently playing and replaying Mind Splitter is so important. Being able to see someone's hand and remove a card from it while also playing a 7-might unit for free is this deck's primary way of claiming leads to close the game out with. And the importance of this unit is exactly why Deadwound Predator wasn't included in Sabik's list. Only 2 Volley Bear Imposing and 3 Mind Splitter. When Last Rites can recycle trash Mind Splitters or straight up replay them late through holding, this unit sees even more value, as opponents won't even want to remove it if it means they'll lose another valuable counter in hand. And if all that wasn't enough, you have Hard Bargain for additional counterplay, and Punch First as a last resort combat trick. This deck's ability to force opposing decks into top deck mode so consistently is very impressive and should definitely be respected moving forward. This was a really cool build and meta read to see from Sabik, showcasing that Dazzling Aurora is still a super threatening deck, and that Bounty Hunter's ganking still holds value over Battle Mistress's gold creation. The first deck of our top 4 here is a pretty standard Aurelia build, all things considered. The only notable change is that this deck has a slightly wider pool of available units, so it doesn't lean as hard into Aurelia's usual Protect the Queen playstyle. Looking at some of the feature matches in Swiss, anytime a Blade Dancer player lost their Aurelia, they were immediately put on the back foot, and if they lost the chosen champion too early, they would struggle to close out games unless they managed to find their second one. In comparison, this build from Crows plays much more naturally on curve, allowing other units like Lonely Poro and Sneaky Deckhand to make some contributions, before moving into Stellar Coin Herder for some draw support that can play similarly to Aurelia in the early and mid game, and then closing things out with Aurelia Fervent and Draven Audacious. This build found a lot of success because it was very careful to protect its units while also playing with more natural tempo and not forcing Aurelia just because she's the strongest unit, but rather allowing smaller units to drain some opposing resources before moving in with Aurelia when the opponent has less responses available. The other top 4 deck is a Herald of the Arcane build from Ghost Driver that was super refreshing to see. Despite Viktor being seen as a deck that was just shy of the top tier of the Origins meta, and now the Spirit Forge meta as well, this is the first time he's made a top 4 at an official event and the first time he's landed in the top 8 since the very first Riftbound Regional in Guangzhou back in August. Not only was this an impressive finish based on Viktor's history, he was also the only legend to make top cut that wasn't in the Chaos domain. With most Herald of the Arcane builds being split between a spell control variant with Viktor Innovator and a unit/token swarm variant with Viktor Leader, Ghost Driver took a more classic approach that was a mixture of both. There's a heavy emphasis here on a versatile selection of units that can all impact the game in unique ways, with a few 3-drop staples like Honest Broker, Xinjiao, Thousand-Tailed Watcher, and even Pickpocket, which is usually reserved as a sideboard unit for decks that run seals, as well as some one-offs like Plundering Poro, Glass Mixologist, and Riptide Rex, which hasn't really seen much play in this format. In addition to the standard 3 copies of Cold the Weak and Hidden Blade that are essential for Viktor decks, the Imperial Decree and Bella's Breath combo was a standout for this list. It's a really cool combo that can potentially remove 6 units in base on top of whatever is sitting at battlefields. Ghost Driver had a legitimate shot at making it to the finals too, but Sabik's Dazzling Aurora list hard countered this deck by utilizing Mind Splitter and Sabotage to prematurely remove his counters like Cold the Weak, Hidden Blade, Imperial Decree, and Salvage, as well as an unyielding Spirit in the sideboard, which I'm sure he wasn't exactly expecting to run into. A bit of an unfortunate ending, but still a run to be admired that should give a lot of hope to Viktor players in a meta where he seems to be outshined by other control decks. There were 3 Draven decks that made it to the top 8, but I'd like to take a quick look at Randy's as one that had a couple of stark differences. With one tempo variant and one other Miracle Engine build reaching the top cut, Randy's Glorious Executioner build was interesting to see in how it capitalized on early game consistency to make late game plays. With most Miracle Engine Draven running 3 Battering Ram, 3 Rasa the Sunderer, and some occasional Nocturne, Randy opted for just 1 Rasa, likely because of his inclusion of Last Rites, which as we saw in Alan ZQ's list, also sequences nicely with Fizz. Additionally, a singular Vi Destructive and Ride the Wind combo also makes an appearance. This is really fascinating because with how popular the Chaos domain is right now, many have seen this combo as unachievable. My assumption is that Randy was so confident in his ability to fill its trash, that the potential upside was worth the risk of it being easily countered by all of the Draven, Ezreal, and Aurelia in the field right now. That said, Kai'Sa had also seen a steady surge in popularity heading into this event, so there were still plenty of matchups where it could find value. This was a really interesting deviation from the usual Draven lists we're seeing at the moment, even though it wasn't quite able to finish higher than the other top cut Dravens. With all 28 legends in attendance at Bologna, it's no surprise to see Draven have the highest share of the field while also having the highest day 2 conversion rate. But despite this incredible popularity and initial perception as a tier 0 deck, he wasn't able to find a place in the top 4. There's no question that Draven is still the most consistent legend in the meta, which gives him statistical advantages in larger sample sizes and into bigger fields. But we're starting to see that the most consistent gameplay doesn't always translate into the highest ceiling. Looking at the 3 decks in the top 4 that were able to beat Draven to secure their spots, Aurelia has the same Chaos counters that Draven does, with Calm counters on top of them, which makes her one of the few decks that can manage to beat Draven in direct combat. That's not to say that she's favored in the matchup, but with some intentional building she definitely has answers. Sabik showed us that Dazzling Aurora is likely a natural counter to Draven, as it doesn't start looking at battlefields until it's set up and knows that it can win combats, which completely starves Draven of his draw support. And Viktor has so much unit removal, paired with expendable units, that it doesn't necessarily mind trading resources with Draven, so long as it can outpace him. While Draven is still a top tier deck in the meta, Bologna has confirmed that we're in a much more balanced format than Origins was. And above all else, having experience piloting your legend is much more important than simply playing whatever is strong. Some other standouts were Blade Dancer with the second highest day 2 conversion rate, Daughter of the Void being the only deck in the top 4 share that didn't make the top cut, Battle Mistress having the 3rd highest day 2 conversion rate while only being the 8th most popular deck, that could still be a sleeper pick since it didn't make the top 8, Loose Cannon being much more popular and playing much better into the field than expected, which proves just how strong the Fury and Chaos Domain combination is right now, Hand of Noxus, Relentless Storm, and Blind Monk having much higher day 2 conversion rates than expected, Nine-Tailed Fox being the 6th most popular deck at the tournament, Radiant Dawn, Fire Below the Mountain, and Mighty Demacia being the only legends to not reach day 2, and Grand Duelist continuing to slip in the rankings, tying Darius with only 4 players making it to day 2. Every Chaos legend made day 2, every Fury legend made day 2, and Fury was the only domain to not be represented in the top 4. That wraps up our recap for the Bologna Regional Qualifier. Let me know your thoughts on how the meta is shaping up, and if you think Ezreal is on his way to dethroning Draven. If you found this video helpful, feel free to like and subscribe. Good luck in your games, and thanks for watching.